so excited to be doing this. This is so cool. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Hey everybody.
Hey everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Everyone's well? Amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. What are we doing here, Cintamani?
This is our first ever episode of Kirtan London's brand new podcast, Journey to Joy. And we are seeking joy.
Yeah, last year, just to put a little context on why we're doing this. Last year we started doing these Instagram live sessions, and they were really popular. And what we were doing, we were talking about the life behind the kirtan, because Kirtan London, that's what we do. We do kirtan. I can safely assume that everyone here loves kirtan. You love kirtan?
So much.
I love kirtan. So we started doing more talks about it to try and to dig a little bit deeper, because there's so much depth to the practice of kirtan and the whole bhakti culture. And so with the success of those Instagram lives last year, we decided, let's try and take it up a notch, and hence this podcast was born. So that's a little bit about why we started this podcast, and it's really exciting because we're going to be looking at this book. I don't know if everyone has this book already or not.
Bhagavad Gita as it is.
We'll be talking about the title as well.
Mm-hmm.
But before we even get into this, we always like to start with an invocation. So maybe we'll just do that before we even explain what it is, and then we can talk a little bit about it.
So we're just going to be asking for grace, especially from the author of this beautiful book, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We're going to be talking about him a lot, and sometimes we'll just call him Prabhupada, just so you know. But yes. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I love invocations.
Ready?
I think so. Okay, so I'd like to give a little bit of background to this book, and in particular, maybe we can start with the author of the book. So this is the Bhagavad Gita. Probably a lot of you are familiar with the Bhagavad Gita. Are people here familiar with what this book is? Maybe by show of hands. Yes? Yeah? Most people. Okay, nice. The Bhagavad Gita is one of the primary books of knowledge from the Vedic canon. So the Veda just means knowledge. And the Vedas are the knowledge of the East, basically, the spiritual knowledge of the East.
Right.
And the Bhagavad Gita, in many ways, is considered to be the ultimate, or the summum bonum of these Vedic literatures.
The very essence, the very condensed form. It's all been packed into this one conversation, which is the beautiful Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita, it literally means the song of Bhagavan, or one who possesses all opulences. So it's a divine song, and yeah, it's very special. Written by a special person, right, Madhva?
So you're going to hear us use a lot of terminology as well. Slowly we'll start to explain what the terminologies mean, because you may not be familiar with everything. So for example, Bhagavan. Bhagavan is a word which means the divine, or it means the ultimate supreme person. So, okay, so now we know a little bit about the book that we're going to slowly be working through. That's kind of going to be the basis of the content that we'll be talking about throughout this podcast. It's really important to talk about the author as well. So, like we said, his name is Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, he traveled from India to New York when he was 70 years old.
70 years old, guys.
By cargo ship. By cargo ship. It was a 3-month journey, and he had 2 heart attacks along the way. This was at the age of 70. 2 heart attacks along the way. He arrived with about $7 worth of $7 US in his pocket, in a country where he never been there before, knew no one, had no contacts. He said when he got off the boat, he didn't even know which way to turn. He didn't know if he should go left or if he should go right. So he went with nothing. And the reason he went was so that he could share this knowledge with people, essentially. He had so much faith in the knowledge of what he had to share that he was willing to make all this sacrifice to travel the world, have 2 heart attacks along the way, and endure so much hardship, because he felt so much compassion for everyone. He knew that this knowledge could help people and improve their lives for the ultimate goal. And we're going to talk about what does that even mean? What's the ultimate goal? So he did so much, and I know for Cintamani and myself, the only reason that we're even here is because of him. So for example, when we chant the invocation, we're really focusing a lot of gratitude to Prabhupada.
Yeah, he's this wonderful central figure to bhakti, especially as it relates to the Western world and all the people whose lives he has touched. This book's been translated into so many languages, just because he felt that the whole world should have this information, that it wasn't fair that only India had this, that it should be given to everyone. And there were many versions of Bhagavad Gita, but his version is very different, and we'll tell you why. But yeah, it's just so much appreciation for Bhaktivedanta Swami.
There was a funny quote. So, because when Prabhupada first went to America, for almost a year, he had very little success. He was trying, his heart was so desperate to share this knowledge with people, but he was struggling to find foothold. He was new in the country, no one knew who he was, and he had no money, he had no political sway, he had nothing. But after a year, there's a nice story as to how he slowly started to find traction and eventually created this worldwide Kirtan movement, because this Kirtan movement, Kirtan London, only exists thanks to Srila Prabhupada. So he obviously started to gain traction, but after he had already started sharing on quite a grand scale, he started getting media attention as well. And he was once asked by a reporter, the reporter said to him, "Why did you come to America? We don't need you. We already have our own religion, and we have, what have you come to? Why are you here?" basically. And no, this was in England.
England.
This was in England, the comment I'm about to say. So this was an English reporter asking Prabhupada this question, why did you come? I find this so beautiful. And Prabhupada replied, because obviously the British had colonized India once upon a time.
Right.
So he said, you came to our country and you took everything, but you forgot the most important thing, which was our rich spiritual culture. So I have come to give you that freely. So
that's so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a very, very witty response and also very beautiful. So what's we have a list of things that we should be working through here. Okay, so that's a little bit about Prabhupada. That's a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. I would invite you as well, just because we're kind of new at the whole podcast thing. So we're going to be doing our utmost to work through as well as we can. But if you feel like we've missed anything, feel free to ask comments. That's one of the reasons we did this on Zoom, by the way, so that it could be a little bit more interactive. So primarily we'll be talking podcast format, it'll be me and Cintamani talking, but that doesn't mean you can't ask questions. So if we've forgotten something, or if we've explained something and actually in our heads, that was a great explanation, but the translation when it comes through the screen was, what the hell did they just say?
Just let us know.
Feel free to write questions in the comment section, because we have a trusty assistant. My wife is over here on the laptop, so she'll be feeding the questions back to us as well. So please do, if you feel so inclined, you can join in as well.
Great.
So Cintamani, tell me, why are you sitting here today? What's your story as to how you became co-host to this new podcast, Kirtan London, Journey to Joy?
How far back are we? I was born.
To your last life. Let's go.
So you and I go way back, don't we? And we both grew up with similar upbringing in the tradition of bhakti. We've been told these stories since we were children. As for my relationship with this book, especially Bhagavad Gita, the first time I read it, I was about, I want to say 6 or 7.
You read it the whole way through?
I tried.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it was like, most of it is...
You were 6, so yeah.
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 But I did make a very good effort. And I've read it a few more times after that. For different reasons. And to be honest, I never really read it. I never really got that attachment for it. And it's quite funny because I was remembering something today when I was reading. I remembered that back in December, I was speaking with my mother. It was Gita Jayanti, which is like the day when this book when the conversation happened. So it's a special day. We read this book, we pray, and she asked me like, "Oh, do you have a special chapter of Bhagavad Gita?" And I said, "Well, not so much. Like I like it. It's a great book, but I wish I knew it better. I wish I was attached to it." And then I get a call from you sometime later, like, "Oh, let's start a podcast." Okay. And then it turns out that we're going to be talking about Bhagavad Gita. So it really feels like a wish fulfilled to be sitting here.
The synchronicities.
Yes, it all lines up.
The synchronicities are amazing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, thank you for agreeing to do this with us, Cintamani. I am very, very excited about where this whole podcast can take us, primarily because it's the same for me. Actually, I related a lot to what you said. I was also raised, so like Cintamani said, I was also raised, my parents took to this bhakti culture when they were young in their early 20s, and I was born and raised in this whole tradition. So from as young as I can remember, I was playing this drum, I was playing the harmonium, I was kind of into it all, and I was also reading the Bhagavad Gita and doing japa, mantra meditation. Our whole lives we've been doing that.
Right.
And it's the same for me. We would actually sit down and read and discuss Bhagavad Gita systematically. my parents have a really kind of in-depth way of trying to understand, spiritual literature, and they trained me up in that way. And it's very, very in-depth, but it's quite slow because of it.
Right.
So I feel like we're studying it for years, and I feel like we never got past chapter 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just because of the nature of how deep the study was.
It's really quite fine, isn't it? They go sentence by sentence and they reflect it back to each other.
There's a whole thing, yeah. It's basically they've incorporated skills of active listening. So like you said, reflecting, things like that. And so I've studied the Bhagavad Gita very in depth to a certain point. And then the rest of it I've read through. But reading through the Gita is quite different to studying it. What you get out of it, it's not like an armchair book. So that's the other reason, basically, that what I'm trying to get at is this is the reason I'm also very excited about this podcast, because like you, this is just the perfect opportunity for us to take our knowledge and understanding of what this book has to share with us and taking that deeper and hopefully starting to be able to use that knowledge in our own lives. And then the cool thing is we get to try and share that with others as we go along the journey as well, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, we're just here to figure it out together and to hopefully share what we find along the way, and have fun and be joyful, because the idea is that we're supposed to get some inner joy.
Kirtan London, journey to joy.
Journey to joy. So there's got to be joy, otherwise why are we here?
What was the next thing on the list, Cintamani? Do you remember?
The next thing is Bhagavad Gita as it is. Why can't we just have any old Bhagavad Gita? Why not Bhagavad Gita as it isn't, or as it might be, or...
It's true. Why is it called Bhagavad? I actually thought about this because in the advert video, when I watched it back, I heard myself say, we're going to be diving into the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And then I carry on. I was thinking, for anyone listening, if they hadn't heard, they probably maybe even struggle to catch me say, as it is. What did he just say? I heard the Bhagavad Gita bit. What was that? So it's interesting. It's worth mentioning. So seeing as you've brought it up, I'll let you explain it, why it's called that.
So, Bhagavad Gita as it is. Basically, there's many versions of the Bhagavad Gita, and this version is special because it's Prabhupada explains himself in the introduction that he has taken the essence of the Gita, the spirit of the Gita, right from Krishna, who spoke the Gita, right from his mouth, and he hasn't changed a thing. And that puts it apart from all other versions, because many people have commented on the Gita over the years, over centuries, and what they've done is they've added their own spin, their own interpretation, or they've even inserted themselves into the Gita. The Gita's about me and my thing, or, so Prabhupada has taken it right back to the essential message, which is all about Krishna and this relationship that he has with his friend Arjuna. And and he's kept it straight to the point, and he has not added any self-aggrandizement or self-importance to it. All he's done is he's just repeated what's been passed down in the purest way possible.
Yeah, as someone who's been raised in what I would call a spiritual tradition, which is probably a little bit different to what most people in England or the Western world have been raised like. It's interesting because you've been. I really relate to this point. Basically, I really like that it's as it is, and I resonate with that because you see people who take spiritual literature and they can use it and abuse it for their own good. So like fake gurus, for example, there's a big thing, like fake gurus. I think that's probably a terminology that everyone understands. People presenting themselves as something that they're not. Because you know what? It's actually so easy to win name and fame if you have a little bit of charisma, a smart mind, and a little bit of knowledge to back it up. And unfortunately, the nature of the world is there are people out there who are happy to misuse that. And so, as someone who's been raised in a culture which I 100% perceive to be genuine, something real, something of substance, it's cringy as hell when you see these fake gurus out there who are presenting just strange, weird philosophy. So that's the import, as far as I see it. It's like, as it is. This is the real thing. There's the actual substance of what was intended to be shared. This is it.
Right.
So I like that.
So Prabhupada, he came with this mood of giving. He really wanted to give people the real message. He didn't have like, oh, I'm gonna make loads of money and I'm gonna get a big house and loads of followers. He didn't have any of that kind of ambition. He just wanted people to know. And that's why this Gita is so much more cleaner than other versions, because it's not full of all these kind of impurities or someone trying to come across as something that they're not.
Yeah. It's so this leads into another point which I thought was important that we talk about. So because Prabhupada, he's not presenting this knowledge with a desire for followers. All he's concerned about is presenting pure knowledge, the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts, as they say.
Yes.
Sometimes the truth hurts. So although a lot of what we're going to cover is very beautiful, it's just naturally beautiful, it's naturally attractive, and it's going to feel immediately like, oh my God, this is like air this is like nourishment for my soul. I feel like I can breathe when I hear this knowledge. It's like it clicks. Yes, this is truth. So a lot of it feels like that. However, sometimes, because this is how I see it, because we have our own perspectives. I have my lens. I see through the Madhva lens based off my upbringing, my experiences in life, my cultural experiences, my cultural norms, and all of that. And not necessarily the way that I see the world is always in my best interest. So you see what I mean there?
Yeah.
There's another term I like to use, which is called enlightened self-interest, which we'll talk more about. But so when Prabhupada's sharing this, the point that I'm trying to make is sometimes he'll say things that might feel, ooh, how do I understand that? How do I process this? How do I accept this as truth? And even me who's been raised, I was born in this culture. I was raised in this culture. Sometimes I come across things and I'm like, I have to stop. And actually, this is actually a good thing. This is Prabhupada himself says you shouldn't be a blind follower. Blind faith is weak faith.
Right.
I think there's one person waiting to be let in. My trusty assistant over there. So these are some things that I think will come up in the podcast. So one thing that I think is going to be, that I thought was really important, is to just face things head on. So even if we come across parts that might feel challenging, we'll talk about it, because that's how we grow, that's how we learn. There's things that have challenged me in the past, and I've had to approach it, discuss it. That's why this forum is so good. In my honest opinion, this is one of the best ways to approach a book like this, because it really needs some mental energy. It needs some thought. Sometimes you talk about it, you work it through, you have your questions. And the last thing that I would like to say on that point is I sometimes have to remind myself, okay, this is it probably sounds weird what I'm saying, but I sometimes have to remind myself that this book really is here for my ultimate good. It's here to lift me up to, I'm going to use a Sanskrit phrase here, Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means eternal, Chit is knowledge, and Ananda is bliss.
Right.
Eternal knowledge and bliss. That's a very common Sanskrit term within this bhakti culture, Sat Chit Ananda. That's our natural constitutional position, and that's what this book is trying to do. It's here to help me, it's my best friend, and it's never saying anything which should be used to cause harm. In fact, that's one of the principles of Vedic principles, ahimsa, non-violence.
Yes, we're here to be uplifted at all. You know, wherever it might take us, or wherever, whatever misunderstandings might be there, ultimately, we have to sort of give it the benefit of the doubt that this was written with a lot of love, and it's here for our benefit, for our highest good. Ultimately.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll come to it. You'll see. You know, we'll talk about it. We'll talk these things through when we come to them. What else was there? Was there anything else that we needed to cover?
So, we need to talk about the Mahabharata.
Ah, yeah.
Right.
I've been talking for a while, so I'll let you take the reins for a little bit.
So
that's a good pun there.
Take the reins.
Yeah. Krishna and Arjuna.
Oh, I like it. Okay. So this book is basically an episode of a huge epic legend called the Mahabharata, and this is all the sequence events that took place around 5,000 years ago and counting. And basically, Bhagavad Gita starts at the beginning of a war. So two armies are poised to fight one another. And right there on that battlefield, among many, many chariots, is one chariot, and on that chariot is Krishna and his dear friend Arjuna, the great warrior. So, how they came to be there, the war is to be fought between two families.
Yeah. Two families. So, well, two families, essentially one family, actually. So the Mahabharata, again, some of you may know it, but if you don't, it's an incredible story. I highly recommend reading the book, the Mahabharata. There are different versions out there. I highly recommend a version by an author called Krishna Dharma. That was a little plug. He's my dad. And he has written one of the, literally in my honest opinion, I don't say this because he's my dad, because he's written other books which I'm not so into, but this particular book is amazing. It's amazing.
I can agree. I can verify that what he's saying is correct. It's an amazing book.
Yeah. And it has actually become one of the best-selling versions of the Mahabharata out there, just in the whole wide world. So, so it really is a very, very excellent retelling, because the Mahabharata is essentially a story. It's already there. There are original scripts to it, and so normally when we see new versions of it out there, it's a retelling of the Mahabharata. So my dad has written a retelling of it, and it's really good. And it's essentially a story of good over evil, with morals and moral codes of conduct, both on a material level and a spiritual level, weaved into the story. That's actually kind of the point of the story in many ways. Mm-hmm. So we see one family pitted against each other. So we have 5 brothers who were known as the Pandavas, and we have 100 brothers who were known as the Kauravas. Now, the 100 brothers and the 5 brothers, they're cousins. So their fathers were brothers. And what happened was, the oldest of the 5 brothers was supposed to be king. actually emperor. He was meant to be the emperor of the world. And the oldest of the 100 brothers was envious of him. And from a young age, he was plotting to get rid of his cousins. From a young age, he would plot to try and kill his cousins, to have them banished, to defeat them in whichever deceitful way he could. And it was always deceitful. Yeah.
Underhanded means poison, light their house on fire. You try to get a mystic to curse them.
Yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then they rigged a gambling match. They ultimately came to a point in the story where they rig a gambling match. This is actually a really emotionally charged part of the story, because anyway, that's another. We'll talk about that. I'm going on a tangent here, but what happens is there's a culmination of this story where, like Cintamani said, there are two armies now pitted against each other on a great battlefield. The battlefield is called Kurukshetra. It's still there in India today. And that's where the Bhagavad Gita is spoken. So Arjuna, he's one of the 5 brothers.
And they're the good guys.
They're the good guys. They're the ones who've tolerated all of the deceitful, underhanded things that their cousins have done for so long. They've tolerated because they're family, and they don't want to. They feel they kind of love their family, and they kind of don't like the enmity. They don't feel the enmity. Mm-hmm. The enmity is really just coming from Duryodhana and his brothers, and they've constantly tried to, how can we avoid this war? And they, if you read the book, you see they really try their best to avoid this head-on situation.
They're always taking the high road,
always. But it does come to this in the end. It comes to this war. So now the Pandavas' army is laid out, the Kauravas' army is laid out, but before the battle starts, Arjuna says to Krishna, Arjuna is one of the 5 brothers, and he's actually he's known at the time to be the world's greatest warrior, or the world's greatest archer. He asks Krishna, who's his chariot driver, to take him forward so that he can see who's been arrayed out against him. He says, take me forward so that I can see who's here to fight for the sinful Duryodhana. Duryodhana is the oldest of the 100 brothers. So Krishna says, okay. So he drives his chariot out to the middle of the battlefield, and all of a sudden Arjuna's able to have a clear vision of who's there. And all of a sudden, the impact of the situation that he's now in hits him. It hits him so hard that he has an emotional breakdown. He sees not only his cousins, but they were raised together as family. So there are people arrayed in the opposite army that he looks at like his brothers. He looks at like his uncles or his grandfather or his own father even. He has these types of familial relationships with so many people who are on the opposing side. And all of a sudden he starts to feel, he feels completely overwhelmed and like, how am I supposed to fight this battle? I can't fight this battle. I can't kill these people. I love these people. Better I die than to fight with these people, because I just couldn't live in a world without them. So this is how essentially, I think there's one more person. But yeah, she's on it. So this is the situation that Arjuna finds himself in. And this is the pretext to how the Bhagavad Gita gets spoken, because the idea is now Krishna, who we understand to be Bhagavan, who we said earlier is the divine. We'll talk about that as well. That's one of the things that comes up in the introduction, so we'll look at that. He then takes the position of teacher with Arjuna.
So they were friends, but now the dynamic sort of shifts because Arjuna needs a different kind of help. That friend can't quite deliver.
Yeah.
And he takes on this position as a teacher, and he starts to instruct him on higher topics to get him out of his head and get him onto the level to do his job, basically.
Yeah. It seems strange, doesn't it? Because what Krishna does, he essentially explains to him why he should fight. Mm-hmm. Because Arjuna starts coming up with all these reasons why he shouldn't. But anyway, that means I'm already jumping ahead because this is starting to get into chapter 1 of the Gita. And we'll get to that. We'll talk about all the different reasons that Krishna gives to Arjuna. He basically talks him through this spiritual higher knowledge, which allows Arjuna to overcome his weakness of heart. That's how it's called in the Gita. He has a weakness of heart. And then he's able to eventually culminate with Arjuna saying, thank you, you've dispelled my ignorance. Now I'm ready to fight. And then the battle begins.
And essentially why it's so important why it's been so important for all the future generations and to us and people all over the world is that this book is, it's Arjuna's dilemma is a universal one. You know, everyone has that moment where they're just like, I can't do it, you know, and then they have to remember why they're here, who they are, what's the most important thing. And so those questions are not exclusive to Arjuna. They're everyone's questions, and that's why it became so widespread, so relatable.
Exactly. It was spoken actually not just for Arjuna's benefit, but for our benefit, each of our benefits. That was the intention of why Krishna he wanted to speak it to Arjuna at that time. Nice. It's so nice. I love telling these stories. Actually, it just brings it all back for me as well. They're so epic. Like I said, I highly recommend if anyone is not familiar with the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is, like we said, it's the story which the Bhagavad Gita sits within, and it's an amazing epic. It's like Hollywood on crack. It's sorry, that was probably a bad phrase to use for a spiritual podcast, but you get the picture. It's a really amazing epic story, and I definitely highly recommend it.
It's got everything, all the intrigue, and the idea is that you know, the reason why the Bhagavad Gita is sandwiched into Mahabharata is to capture the attention of regular people.
Yeah.
Who may not be interested in just studying dry philosophy. Okay, well, here's a drama, you know, and if you like drama, here it is. And within there, we just slipped this knowledge in nice and sneaky, you know.
It's true. That's exactly why that's kind of why it was presented like this.
Like a pill in a cake, just like, you know, hidden medicine for you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that was. I feel like we're doing okay so far.
All right.
Are we doing okay so far? This is the first one. Please bear with us, huh? Thumbs up.
Oh,
everyone's
nice.
Happy.
We got a thumbs up.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can see Ananta's one of our team, and he's like, yeah, I love it.
Nice.
Thank you. It helps. It definitely helps. So Cintamani did a really good job at preparing for this, so that's why I keep pulling on Cintamani to say, so what was next? So was there anything else that we wanted to say before we basically dived into the book?
So we need to talk about Krishna and Arjuna. Who are these two wonderful people? What's so great about these two?
Amazing. I'll let you start this one.
So, all right, Krishna. What can be said about Krishna? Vedic knowledge has three conceptions of the divine, supreme source energy, God, or something bigger than ourselves. And the first is Brahman, which is bright light, all-pervading, life-giving, happy, blissful light. And when people meditate, generally they defer to Brahman and they think about, you know, bright light, bliss, emptying their mind, that kind of thing, to connect to Brahman. That's like the practice of the average yogi.
Mm-hmm.
The second concept is Paramatma. So that's like localized Brahman. Everyone in their heart has a little spark of source energy, known as Paramatma, and he acts like a best friend. So he gives remembrance, forgetfulness. He's in every single living being's heart, right? When we say namaste, that means essentially the God in me respects the God in you. So that namaste speaks to Paramatma. And then thirdly, we have Bhagavan, who is complete, and he's a person, right? A full, walking, talking, emotional person, right? With a personality, with thoughts, with feelings, with friends, with enemies, with relatives, and that's Bhagavan. He's got everything, right? And we, in this context, we call him Krishna. And so he's actually a historical personality as well. He was walking the earth 5,000 years ago. You've got your eyewitness accounts, you've got your records that this happened, you've got your verifications from sages and mystics of the time that he was there, that he was performing superhuman acts that were truly wonderful. And it was also predicted so that he would be here on earth, coming to uplift all the persons who were confused about who they really are.
Amazing.
So that's Krishna. Krishna is 100%. So you have Brahman and Paramatma, who are very, very powerful, but then you've got Bhagavan, who is like powerful in all the ways that you can imagine.
Right.
And other belief systems will call him other things. But
right. Yeah. Exactly. Like in the context of bhakti-yoga, essentially we're talking about God. Just going to throw the G word out there.
The G word.
Which I know for many people it carries a weight or it carries a stigma. And I feel like sometimes many people have been raised in environments where their environment created a stigmatic feeling around the word just because of the way they were forced into a relationship with the word. Whereas I feel very fortunate. I feel extremely fortunate that my relationship with God has been so beautiful from an early age. I'm very comfortable with it. But anyway, yeah, we call God Krishna, but there's also this is one of the things I love about Krishna consciousness. That's another term, if you're not familiar with, you'll hear a lot. Krishna consciousness or God consciousness from the Bhakti tradition. Another one of the things that I really love, which is it's inclusive. One of the things that's always bugged me about religion, has never made sense to me, is this idea, for example, and I think this is what causes a lot of problems in religion, that I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
You're going to hell.
You're so wrong that you're going.
You're so wrong. You gonna burn in hell, girl, forever. And I'm going to heaven. See you later. And so it's just, for me personally, and I hope that this doesn't cause offense to anyone, but just for me personally, it doesn't resonate. It's never made sense to me. Whereas the Krishna conscious perspective is so wholesome. It's so wholesome and it's so understanding of what's the principle here? What's the ultimate truth here that we're all touching on, and so it's not like, and this is an interesting thing to say here, that what I'm saying is I'm not trying to say that everything is the same. What I'm saying is there is truth in everything. If you look at the ultimate principles, there is truth. And so if anyone in this world is, at least this is how I see it, this is how I understand bhakti, the bhakti philosophy. If I'm trying to have a relationship with God, with the divine, it doesn't matter what I call him. I might call him Allah, I might call him Jehovah, I might call him Jesus, I might call him something, I might call him Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, it's a very, very personal thing. It's something that is within me, my relationship with the divine.
It's very individual.
Exactly, very individual, very personal. What's nice about bhakti-yoga in particular, and this is what perhaps differentiates it, the Krishna conscious approach, is that it's the concept of the relationship that we can develop with the divine is higher than anything I've come across, anything else that I've come across. Normally, the relationship with God ends at awe and reverence. Almighty, divine, and God.
Almost fear-based.
Well, there is a lot of that. There is a lot of fear-based religion out there. Whereas this one, Krishna consciousness is telling us that actually our eternal position is having a loving, intimate relationship with the divine person.
That's completely individual, and your relationship and my relationship, it's not going to be the same. Like, it's every single person has their own completely special, completely fulfilling relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very personal. It's very personal. Actually, that is one of the ways that you can term this. We're a personalist philosophy. So nice, so beautiful. One other thing I liked as well, I still, even though we understand, what we're going to be talking a lot about is the ultimate conception, Bhagavan, Krishna, and our eternal loving relationship with him. But I also like Paramatma.
Me too.
I like Paramatma. And again, we're kind of jumping ahead here. This is going to some of the stuff that's in the book that we're going to be looking at. But Paramatma is essentially the form of the divine that is ever present with us, eternally within our heart. So we're never alone. We're actually never alone in that sense, if we are able to come to that understanding. And I think for a lot of people in the world, a lot of people need reminding of that.
It's a very comforting feeling. It's a very reassuring concept that we have this friend who's with us through all kinds of trials, tribulations, doesn't matter what. Paramatma is next to us, as close as anyone can ever get. And everything is known, the whole struggle, everything is known to this person. And they're just waiting for us to acknowledge that relationship.
And what's nice as well is that this is, and we'll see this in the book, Prabhupada, he goes through quite some effort to help give credential to what he's sharing. He's trying to help us realize that this is not just some, I'm not just saying this to make you happy. It's some hippy-dippy thing that I made up myself. God is always with you, which is fine. I'm not trying to say anything negative there, but the point is that this is Vedic wisdom. What we're sharing right now is actually being directly shared in these books of wisdom, in these scriptural books. So it's really very, very powerful and very true. And it's just down to us to try and connect with that, I suppose.
Yeah, so we're hoping that it's resonating with some of you, and there's plenty of time to understand it more and to ask your questions and to address it in any way that you feel needs deeper understanding.
I should have a little notebook with me, because there were things that I forgot. But anyway,
Coming up to an hour.
We're already coming up to an hour, huh? Was there anything else that we wanted to address before we even dived into the content?
Well, let's talk about Arjuna.
Yeah.
So Arjuna, as I was saying before, his dilemma is the living being's dilemma.
You're so good at keeping track, by the way. See how many times I've asked you, I feel like I'm constantly putting you on the spot, what's next? And each time you're like, we're talking about this now. Just
well, I got the notes in front of me.
But you're not even looking at the notes. I can see
my phone locked like about half an hour ago, and I've just been winging it ever since.
So impressed. So impressed. Thank you very much, Cintamani. Carrying this like a boss.
Thank you. So Arjuna, he's the soul, and he has this rare and wonderful chance that has never really been given until this point. He has the chance to ask God anything at this particular moment, and it's so special. The whole conversation is based on this friendship that they have. They're actually they were born at the same time, and they have this deep friendship. They look alike. They spend so much time together. It's like a friendship like you've never seen. Like it's so tight, and there's absolute trust, right? Maybe we can just look at the picture so you can see. I don't know if you can see actually. Can you see?
On the right.
Yeah. Well, there's the two of them together. Yeah, we got thumbs up. And yeah, actually they have the same name. They're both called Krishna sometimes, because they even kind of look alike. So Arjuna was also affectionately referred to as Krishna sometimes, because that's how tight it is. So this relationship, this whole conversation is between two persons who are very, very trusting, very, very loving with each other, and have this deep, deep friendship that is accessible to all of us as well.
Thank you. Beautiful. And I guess Arjuna, I think you said it as well, but I guess he represents us as well, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So like we said, the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, but essentially it's Krishna also speaking directly to us.
Yeah. And it's also said that Arjuna, he's actually, because of his proximity to Krishna, he had this understanding already, but Krishna kind of threw him in the deep end so that this conversation could be had, so that other people, right down to us, right here, right now, would benefit from it in the future, ultimately.
So we're coming up to the hour for this first session today. And I feel like we've covered more or less the kind of the prelude information that then gives some context to why we're doing this book, what the book is, who the people are, what the story is, who we are. So I'm kind of feeling like maybe now is a good time, because I don't think the podcast is always going to work exactly in this format where we're just live on Zoom. We'll probably be going live online as well at some point.
Right.
So this is one of the few occasions where we probably have a greater opportunity, if there are questions, that we could go into that. So kind of put it to you, because the podcast, there's one thing that we forgot to mention. We have a very special treat to see this whole thing out, which, being that it's a Kirtan London podcast, we would love to finish with some Kirtan before we finish. And I think that's going to be hopefully will become a part of the ongoing podcast. And I am being shown a question. Okay, cool. So I just put it out that, yeah, if there are any questions, maybe if you want to ask them, you can put them in the, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got one kind of comment come in. Feel free to put your comments in your questions if you have any, but if you don't, that's also fine. We can go straight to the Kirtan. But one thing that we've just been asked to share as well, and I think it is important. I think it's an important thing to say, because we've spoken a lot about God. Actually, I'm curious. Maybe by a show of, like, maybe there's some thumbs in the middle. I don't know where I'm at with this. Right now, I feel a bit, maybe. Maybe you're like, yeah, I love it. I'm totally on board. Maybe you're like, I mean, we're all very, very different, and that's totally fine. So one thing that is important to say as well is that the Bhagavad Gita is a book which is studied by millions of people around the world, and majority of them are God conscious, but many of them are also not. It's a very, very wonderful book of wisdom, and there's so many things in here that can just help us to live a life of, we use that term again, enlightened self-interest. We all want to be happy. We all want to be joyful. In fact, this is something, see, I'm remembering, this is one of the things I want to talk about. That's why we call this podcast Journey to Joy. Because we all want to be happy, ultimately, right?
Does anybody want to be sad? Anyone? No.
It's funny. There's a really funny little story. So, a young boy was in class once, and the teacher gave the students an exercise, and he asked them, "I want you to write down what you want to be when you grow up." So all the students, they were there, and they had to write out what they wanted to be when they grew up. So most of the students were writing, "I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or this, that, and the other. I want to be I want to be a celebrity, I want to be a film star," whatever it might be. One young child wrote, "I want to be happy." And when the teacher saw this young boy's or girl's comment, they said, "I think you misunderstood the idea behind the exercise." And the child replied and said, "I think you misunderstood life." The point is not to be all of these things. That's not the point, right? We think so many things are going to make us happy. And this is what I was saying when I was talking about enlightened self-interest. That we're all trying to be happy. And we're going about it in ways that we think best to be happy. But sometimes the things that we're trying, they don't work for us. And it's not because, well, it's because sometimes we lack enlightened self-interest. So that's what the Gita is trying to share with us. You want to be happy? All right, here's how. Here's the actual way to achieve it. So even if the whole God thing doesn't work for you, the book still has a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, which provides just super valuable happiness lessons.
It's sort of like a cleanser for your mind. Like sometimes there's just clouds in the way and doubts and insecurities. But this conversation clears so much of that up so that you can just get on with what you're supposed to be getting on with. They call it dharma, like your duty as a soul in this life, and it sets you on that road. It gives you a target so that you can, like an arrow, you can just focus.
Beautiful.
All right. More questions, or was that Kirtan time?
I think it's time for some Kirtan.
Yeah. So we have some Kirtan for you, a little mantra.
Maybe just before we start, because I think the Kirtan would be a nice way to just finish. So we can do the announcements first. I think you did the announcements on the video, Cintamani, you remember? So you got that down.
So this podcast is going to be happening twice a month, on the second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday of every month. So you can catch us then. And if you feel like this is helping you somehow, if you feel happier, more joyful, more anything at all, if you feel like it's been helpful to you, please go ahead and share it with someone who you think also could do with that boost. Because that's what friends do, right? We don't keep good things to ourselves. We have something good that we wanted to share with all of you. So now that you have access to it, it would be nice if you shared it with your friends as well.
Beautiful.
What else was there? Oh, and if you would like a copy of the Bhagavad Gita so that you can follow along with us, you may send a message to Kirtan London and we will get that to you.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. And if you if you've enjoyed today, if you felt like this is something that you might be interested to almost kind of keep up with, more or less constantly, then you can read the Gita with us. We're going to be going through it more or less systematically. So from next week, from the next podcast, which is going to be the fourth Wednesday, the second and fourth, the fourth Wednesday of this month, we'll be looking at chapter 1.
Yep, straight into chapter 1.
We'll be looking at chapter 1. So what me and Cintamani will be doing is we'll have read the chapter and we'll be coming into the podcast bringing our understandings of the key messages, the juiciest wisdom bites, and then just breaking them down, talking through them, discussing it. How does this resonate with us? What are the messages that we can take away from this? What can we apply from this knowledge in our lives to start improving the quality of our own lives? Do we agree with this? Are there questions? What are our experiences? Things like that. So there's some level of interaction as well available, I think, with this moving forward. So if you want to read along with us, you can. And you may even feel like you can present questions perhaps before the podcast even. And that way it would also provide nice discussion material for us to come into the podcast with, and we can talk about those points and things like that.
Right.
So I think that's everything.
Is that everything? Okay.
We did it. Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah.
What was it?
I missed something.
We're good. Okay.
We're good. So
it's challenging trying to keep up with stuff and talk.
It's a lot to think about.
All right.
So we have a little mantra for you. It's small, but there's a lot of meaning to be had in it. Actually, I was just reading about it yesterday, and it was said that it was Mahatma Gandhi who said that even if every other book is lost, if this one verse remains, then righteousness will live on forever. That's what he said.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So this is from Sri Ishupanishad. It's a very old text, and it's got quite an interesting meaning, and it's a lot to be unpacked. But I will just explain it to you very, very succinctly. It says that the Supreme Source is perfect and complete, and that anything that you take away from the Source is also perfect and complete, and anything that you take away from what you've taken away is also complete. So it's like a cake. If I have a cake and I give half to Madhva, now I have 50% and he has 50%. But if this cake is divine, I take half and I give it to Madhva, and now he has 100% and I still have 100%. And then he gives some to Sundari and she's got 100% as well. So what it means is that
there's more cake for everyone.
More cake for everyone. And
I like this philosophy.
It means that, we all come from this divine source who is perfect and complete. And even though we have that same quality in minute quantity, we are also complete. So we are just right where we are. and to be satisfied in that and to be happy in that is a great and wonderful thing. And that's what this verse is all about. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah, it was clear. There's lots of cake.
Lots of cake for everybody.
I'm joking. I'm probably confusing them more now, but
it's just hungry.
No, it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful verse.
Yes. Thank you. So, oh, thank you. So sweet, all of you. Thank you.
Doesn't Cintamani have such a beautiful voice?
Thank you.
She leads some fire kirtan, telling you. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy lives to come and join us here for this first episode of
Journey to Joy. You have to say it like that, otherwise it's not joyful, and that's what we gotta do.
So we're both really excited to continue this journey. Thank you for showing some support, bearing with us in this first episode. So grateful, and we're looking forward to this journey to joy with you all.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good night.